Hey folks, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Really looking forward to catching up and hearing from the panel of our experts to discuss the international experience and global skills development, the Canadian approach. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that I am sitting in Toronto. I'm on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Today, we have a great session featuring 4 different panelists. Monique Comeau with the International Experience Canada program, which is part of the Government of Canada. We have Jonathan Hull with the Employment and Social Development Canada, which also is with the Government of Canada. We have Andy Lang with Concordia University. And we're going to hear from the employer perspective from Helen Nikitopolous from McCain Foods Limited. I wanted to welcome everyone. I know some of you have been fortunate enough to go to in-person conferences. Others are still waiting to do so, and I appreciate you joining us here today. I think it's great that we have an experience to network and learn what's going on in our field and see some of the best practices. And as you'll see in the next hour, some of the initiatives that are happening in Canada, which I think could be transferable to other parts of the world as well. As I mentioned, so Monique and Jonathan are joining us to give sort of a policy perspective from the Government of Canada. We have Andy from Concordia University, he's a senior advisor, and we have Helen Nikitopolous with McCain Foods. And for those of you who are not familiar with McCain Foods, it is pretty much ubiquitous to any Canadian grocery store, and maybe Helen can touch on all the products that they offer. I am a big fan of their French fries, but they make much more than just French fries. So, and I also wanted to mention that we're also joined by colleague Melquin Ramos, who is situated in Santiago de Chile, and he will be curating the question and answer portion of the program today. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button to ask the question, and then Melquin will ask the panelists to give their opinions of that. Also, feel free to type in your name and where you're tuning in from in the chat feature, and we'd love to hear from you with that. Without further ado, I'm going to call on Monique to tell us a little bit about the International Experience Canada program, and then we will have each of the panelists discuss their work and their program and what they've seen over the last couple of years as it relates to the internship, co-op, and work integrated learning sector in Canada. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Monique.
Great, thanks, Matt. So I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, and that's the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. And my pronouns are she, her, and elle. So International Experience Canada is a Government of Canada's youth mobility visa program, often referred to as working holiday visas. It allows Canadians between 18 and 35 to work and travel in any of over 35 partner countries and territories, and for youth citizens from these countries and territories to travel and work in Canada. So IEC work permits make it cheaper, faster, and easier to work and travel than alternative work permits. Work permits can be valid for up to 2 years, depending on country-specific requirements, such as age limits, duration of stay, and work restrictions. IEC is reciprocal, so that is why youth citizens from those partner countries can also do the same in Canada. Working and traveling abroad through IEC provides the flexibility to cater experiences to personal and professional goals. So youth can plan a gap year between studies and work. They can gain international work experience to further build their resume, or they can do a co-op or internship placement abroad during their studies. In general, for youth wishing to participate in IEC, there are 2 types of work permits. Open work permits allow youth to work in any industry for any employer for any amount of time. They do not need to have a formal job offer before they apply for this work permit. Employer-specific work permits require youth to have a formal offer of employment before applying for the permit. Foreign youth citizens coming to Canada have 3 streams to choose from. So along with the open work permit, there are 2 types of employer-specific work permits. The international internship co-op, which is reserved for students who are undertaking a work term or internship as part of their academic field of study, and young professionals, which helps youth gain professional work experience in their field. So with our country partners, while the 2 general categories of work permits exist, there might also be additional programs and streams available for Canadian youth that fall within those youth mobility arrangements. Next slide, please. So prior to COVID, with Canada being a popular destination for youth, each year we had approximately 60,000 foreign youth citizens coming to Canada. But the numbers are different when we look at Canadians going abroad. Despite it being easier, cheaper, and faster to go abroad with IEC, pre-COVID, there were only approximately 17,000 to 20,000 Canadian youth going abroad. So that's approximately that 3-to-1 ratio. Canadians are not taking advantage of this opportunity, and this is significant because employers continue to emphasize the need for graduates to have global and intercultural competencies, which are often not learned in a formal education setting. So as such, opportunities like co-op programs and longer-term work experiences abroad, where youth are able to immerse themselves in a culture different from their own, have been identified as important sources to gain these competencies. And that's where IEC comes in. So in 2019, the Government of Canada launched the new International Education Strategy, which includes an outbound mobility component that you're going to hear more about today. And IEC has a role to play in enabling youth to work and study abroad. The next slide, please. This is one of my favorite slides. So we've heard from some of our former IEC participants that they have benefited immensely from their experiences, including being able to acquire those important global competencies and cultural awareness. You'll notice there's a thread in their comments. Their experiences were immersive and they learned more about themselves and their host country's cultures. And at the same time, they brought that knowledge home and broadened their perspectives of Canada and being Canadian. And they developed personally and professionally through their experiences. So some other IECers have also said things like, the impact of my experience abroad extends beyond my time in Scotland. It continues to open doors and provide new opportunities for further growth, both personally and professionally. Or working allowed me to learn even more about Taiwanese culture since I was working beside Taiwanese people every day. And I really want to highlight Michaela on the right. In 2019, IEC hosted an Indigenous to Indigenous exchange with Michaela, who went to Australia, and Sean, who came to Canada from Southern Australia. You can read about her thoughts on the slide, but interestingly, both of them noted that they learned more about their host country's Indigenous history, which in turn made them more curious about their own. So while the cultural mobility is still a relatively new concept in Canada, awareness and understanding among Canadian youth about the value of international experiences is increasing. And with more and more institutions being pushed to create globally aware graduates with skills suited to the current and emerging labor markets, the academic sector in Canada is encouraging their students to gain a global perspective and improve their cultural awareness through international placements and opportunities, including IEC. And with that, Matt, I'll turn it back to you.
Still falling into bad habits. Thank you so much, Monique, for your presentation. And I'm going to move on to Jonathan Hull to give us his thoughts on the program that he works with. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to see everyone. Like Monique, I'm located in Ottawa on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. And personally, manager of the program policy team within the learning branch of Employment and Social Development Canada, which is a huge federal department, provides a lot of social employment and training and learning related supports to Canadians. And so one of my sort of primary responsibilities is the policy lead and oversight of the outbound student mobility pilot, which is a study and work abroad program. So I'll just take a few minutes to kind of walk through to try to provide a bit of an overview and cover some of the key points. I'm also realizing my slides are not as visually appealing as Monique's, but here we go. So yeah, the pilot's in place sort of grosso modo to promote study and work abroad opportunities for Canadian college and university students. So it's for students enrolled domestically as part of their studies in Canada. It's study and work. And in terms of work, it's co-ops or internships, which can be facilitated with International Experience Canada in terms of the work permit. And those are coordinated at the post-secondary institution level. The pilot program does have, it does have a third-party delivery model. So Universities Canada and Colleges and Institutes Canada are responsible for sort of the management and oversight and implementation of the pilot. Those are the two sort of national organizations that represent the university and college sector in Canada. I would say too, there is an emphasis on, in terms of program design, there's a big emphasis on supporting students who otherwise would not have an opportunity to study or work abroad. So students from low-income families, Indigenous students, students with disabilities, as well as a priority given to diversifying destination countries and supporting kind of broad-based innovation in the sector. In terms of activities through the pilot program, students receive both financial and non-financial support, and a wide range of activities are eligible, be it a semester abroad, a week-long course, group study, summer school, so forth. And being a pilot, we do have a pretty robust, I would say, data collection and evaluation plan to assess impact. So having said all that, next slide, please. Having said all that, I can share a few words on its status. So as mentioned, it was announced in 2019, plan to implement our delivery partners target launch was April 2020. So you can imagine how that went with COVID. However, kind of due to the uncertainty around travel at the time, the pilot's delivery approach was modified. In summer 2020, we opted to use some of the projects or some of the program's innovation focused funding to support projects to help institutions test new tools and approaches and adapt their mobility programming. We saw it as a way to sort of support the sector and continue to make progress towards the pilot's objectives. And I think in total, the pilot supported 130 innovation projects. Approved projects fell under different themes, including testing wraparound supports and conducting research on mobility barriers and piloting virtual mobility experiences, which is a kind of a hot topic these days. And on the whole, the projects were really successful in providing opportunities to students while travel restrictions were in place in Canada, and to help post-secondary institutions position themselves for the full launch of the pilot. So those projects wound down in spring 2021. And at that time, our delivery partners ran a call for proposals for the full implementation of the pilot, which resulted in 124 new outbound mobility projects, which are in place today. And happy to report that sort of under these new projects, students have begun to travel as of March 2020. So in a way, the pilot program, albeit delayed, we're getting back to sort of the original intent. Expecting that around 16,000 undergraduate students to benefit, with a good majority of the students being Indigenous, low income, or students with disabilities. And one thing I didn't mention is that our delivery partners have branded the outbound pilot as Global Skills Opportunity. The brand is fantastic. The They have a lot of great comms projects and project related information on their website. So I would encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning more. And then finally, next slide, please. I just thought I'd give a word on sort of the impetus and objectives of the pilot itself. So one of the main objectives of the pilot is to help students develop skills and build intercultural competencies, which in turn we hope will lead to better learning and labor market outcomes. Research has reinforced that study and work abroad leads to positive outcomes for individuals, including the development of global competencies, understanding soft skills that individuals need to respond, as Monique mentioned, to the changing nature of work, better labor market outcomes. We see that students who have study or work experience abroad tend to have higher degree completion rates, better employment rates, and higher earnings. And finally, strengthen global networks and understanding of regions of economic importance. So those are some of the benefits we kind of envision, and would also add too that from a Canadian perspective, and Monique touched on this, we don't necessarily have a culture of international student mobility or a strong culture. Canadian students study or work abroad a lot less compared to peer countries, and some of those peer countries have invested in the space already with positive results. So that's kind of the kind of the rationale, raison d'etre for the pilot. I'll maybe stop there. I know that's maybe been a lot, so happy to clarify anything or respond to questions too, and I'll turn it back to you, Matt.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And so we're going to move on to Andy. So Andy is with Concordia University in Montreal, and he'll be talking, amongst other things, about a program to Uganda. And he's sort of on the business end of the vision of the Global Skills Opportunity Program. So without further ado, I'll send it over to you, Andy.
Okay, so we'll just go. Thank you. All right, so again, my name is Andy Lang, and I'm from Concordia University in Montreal. There's quite a few universities in North America named Concordia. We don't really have any relationship or any ties other than the name. It seems to be a good name for a university, so that's who we are. We have about 50,000 students total on our campus and all of our programs, about 10,000 international students, and then of course those of you from outside Canada and those of you from inside Canada know that we're pretty multilingual. We are an English language university in a French-speaking city. We do have 2 campuses, and we are a comprehensive university, which is basically known as a university that does everything except for medicine and law in Canada. And then the last little tidbit I'll put is we have about 214,000 alumni around the globe. So yes, it is a big place. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about one of the examples of the Global Skills Opportunities Innovation Programs that we conducted here during the pandemic. It involved basically a series of virtual internships in Uganda. Next slide, please. So in short, we typically have a site where we send students each summer to engage or to conduct basically development internships with a partner site that we have there in Gulu. The activities that they do each year change. They can be anything from assisting in local schools to helping with infrastructure to even providing crisis management support for some of the children warriors who were kidnapped there a few years ago. But in short, when the pandemic hit and people couldn't travel, we were faced with the question of what do we do with our students during this time? So we know we can't travel, but can we do something online? And to be completely honest with you guys, I'm a study abroad person, always have been for about 20 years. I love to travel, I love to go, and I completely believe in the power of human-to-human contact. So for somebody like me, virtual internships, virtual mobility really was not that exciting of a topic. And I kind of felt that the students might not be as excited either. So we didn't really know what to expect. We had very low expectations, but we actually had amazing results. And based on those results, we're going to basically continue to include virtual internships in our Uganda offerings, as well as ones that take place on site now. What we found though, and I think what was important from that experience and being forced in that space, is that even though there might be some bias, some preference, to face-to-face or physical mobility, we did find that appropriately suited virtual international internships can be successful. So the activities that we chose for the students to do were chosen in consideration of the fact that it was going to be online. And we thought to ourselves, well, how are we going to sustain interest by both the people in Uganda plus our students? So what is an activity that lends itself naturally to the online environment? And as we were all sitting there on Zoom at a university, as we had been for several months, we realized, well, this is it. This is universities. This is what we can do. We can teach, we can transfer knowledge, and we can do it via Zoom now too. So that basically was the basis for our internships. The challenge on the other side was finding something appropriate too. Which if you've ever dealt with Africa, you will know that they're actually quite well wired, especially with mobile technology, and that virtual sort of tools and the internet are no stranger to them, especially the youth there. So what we did was we decided to teach courses, have our students teach courses in computer literacy to Ugandan school children, and then courses in entrepreneurship to Ugandan high school students. Next slide, please. As a result, what we sort of found was that the intercultural training can take place online. It doesn't replace the in-person interactions and activities, and that was one of the things that we learned from participants. So both the school children participating in Uganda, as well as the Canadian university students who were conducting the courses. So the activity that they were doing, by the fact that it was an online course, the expectations were already set. There was no we got rid of the dynamic of how are we going to do this online, because we were doing something, as far as we were concerned, that's supposed to be online at that point in time. And it was less of a response to the pandemic and just something that we were, quite honestly, supposed to be doing. But one thing we did here throughout the experience is that, of course, you know, a virtual internships and experience has to be designed based on the real world. One of the things that I was concerned with was, how are you going to be able to sustain interest in this for 12 weeks, basically? And again, it had to went down to the students' interest. They said that they would not have basically done this same internship face-to-face in Uganda. They thought that the instruction, the time the students got to practice versus the time they came back to interact with the instructors was appropriate. They thought that had they gone to the face-to-face delivery method, which would have been about 6 weeks and much shorter, it would have been too fast. They found that it enabled them to continue studying while also interning while they were here in Montreal. But one thing they did say is that they did not think that virtual mobility was an absolute substitute for physical mobility. And they were quite clear in letting us know that what they didn't want to see were virtual internships for students with less financial resources, and face-to-face international internships for students with resources. And I just kind of put the EDI word or acronym up there because I found that that was an important note to take and keep in mind as we also have conversations about inclusion and international mobility in general. The sort of underlying conclusion is that the internship has to be appropriate for the face-to-face, or it has to be appropriate for the online setting. As well, we did find that the virtual internship did provide exposure to the host culture, adequate exposure. as well as it also enforced collaboration between markets internationally. So basically, I think what I'm trying to say is that even though students were being zoomed in to an African classroom, some of the things that they reported back to us were things that I reported initially. So number one, we actually had a lot of IT students who volunteered to do this, which was another interesting aspect of it, because I was expecting education students and not IT students, but they were very willing to share. But they also were taken back by how well connected to the internet and how fluent in internet technology African children were. It was something that blew their mind and also opened up their mind to the development possibilities there, as well as the rapid development that's taking place as well. I think in their minds, they thought they were going to be zoomed into some place that was quite primitive, and they were actually met with some place, or they were faced with people who held the bar for instruction a little higher than they were expecting to go into. So next slide, please. So as a result of the experience, like I said before, we are going to include virtual internships moving forward in our Uganda development offerings. I have a feeling that most of them will come in terms of student delivered online courses on various topics that our partners select. But I would say, though, moving forward to, as we look at, what does the future of mobility look like post-pandemic? I will say personally, my prejudice for the physical over the online, I've gotten over that barrier. And again, I think I was able to do that just by seeing, okay, yes, you can do fun things, you can do meaningful things with appropriate thought. But I also do think that we do need to do more development of online and hybrid experiences post-pandemic. So how can we use the internet for training to enhance and build upon the face-to-face experience? The hybrid approach is very interesting for us in study abroad as well as internships, because we find that on one hand, you might want or think that a long-term immersive program is more beneficial than short-term programs, but we actually find that short-term programs that are well put together and for which the students are well prepared, and there's also follow-up services for the program as well, that they can be just as valuable, especially just in exposing students to new market knowledge, et cetera. We've also learned that one thing that students want from study abroad, whether it be internship or academics, is they want a tangible intercultural experience. So what I mean by that is, one thing that has jumped out at us is they want something, some sort of paper, some sort of recognition of the experience, but also the skills. So moving forward in the study abroad world, for sure, I think that we're going to have to work harder to find a way to recognize, to document the experience on the transcript for the student's sake, so that way they can also present it to an employer as something that they did, and it can be seen very easily. But also, I think we have to do a better job at universities to articulate the skills, the soft skills that the students are gaining, and how they can articulate those to employers. So a lot from that short little program. It was certainly a disruption, the pandemic, but from the disruption came a lot of opportunities. And I certainly believe that we'll be hearing more and functioning more in the virtual world than we have in the past, though hopefully we can get back to more face-to-face as well too. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. And I look forward to answering questions and discussing with you guys later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. So before I hand it over to Helen, I just wanted to mention that, so I've known Helen for close to 10 years. During my days as the site director for the Toronto office of the Academic Internship Council, Helen used to come in and talk with our students Many of them were engineering students. She was formerly with an engineering consultancy organization that also did architecture and urban planning and that sort of thing. So Helen has greatly helped me over the years, and I was very pleased to see that Helen has found a new great opportunity with a very large company. And she'll tell you a little bit about her role. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Matt. That's a long time that we've known each other, definitely. And I'll apologize in advance for my voice. My allergies are bad these days, so a little bit hoarse. So apologies for that. So I'm Helen, as Matt mentioned. I'm responsible for our campus and early talent programs at McCain Foods. So a couple of quick facts about McCain. Everyone knows we make French fries. French fries, pizza pockets, McDonald's French fries are all McCain potatoes. So the latest fact is 3 out of every 5 fries consumed globally is a McCain fry. So it's interesting. Yeah. We have about 21,000 employees globally, and about 52 facilities, production facilities around the world as well. So in my role, I'm responsible for everything student related and new grad related. So co-ops, interns, and new grads. So making sure that everyone who comes to us has first and foremost a fantastic experience and gets what they need, from us. It's just as key for us as an employer to have students that are happy and students that are getting the experiences they need. We hire at McCain about 40 students a year right now across North America. Part of the reason that I was brought on was to really expand that to a more global scope. As Matt mentioned previously at IBI Group, we were hiring around 150 students a year globally. And we will touch on this more, but international experience is so critical from a student perspective. It makes my experience, students more well-rounded, more able to interact with many different people, comfortable speaking, and the skills that you get when you go kind of outside of your comfort zone are really critical and worthwhile. So looking forward to the rest of the chat.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen. So I want to encourage people in the audience, if you have any particular questions, use the Q&A feature, and my colleague Melquin will ask the panel the questions. But I prepared a few questions just to get us started. So being a Canadian, I can say this, Canada prides itself on being multinational, yet perhaps ironically, our young people don't travel as much, have international experiences at the same level as some of the peer countries. And I'm thinking of Australia, New Zealand, China, India, and then many of the EU countries. So I guess what it comes down to, and particularly with the two government programs, why is it important for our students to study abroad and or have international experiences, and how is that hopefully going to change in the future with better engagement? So I'll send this over to Jonathan first, but I would encourage any of the other panelists to jump in to add any further comments. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Matt. And first off, you're right. Fewer Canadian college and university students work or study abroad compared to peer countries. And while our data aren't great, in Canada, it's sort of 10 to 11% have a study or work abroad experience, whereas countries like France, it's over 30%. Most of the EU is higher. Australia is definitely higher. The US is higher. So we definitely lag behind peer countries. Which, as sort of I mentioned at the outset, is a bit of one of the motivations for our pilot program in terms of promoting opportunities. But in terms of why it's important, I think in addition to stronger learning and labor market outcomes for students, I think it's fair to say that international education is a bit sort of, there's kind of new realities. There's more sort of global interconnectivity. We're seeing economic activity shift outside of traditional trading partners, which I think puts a premium on intercultural competencies and knowledge of other countries. And as mentioned before, and by Helen as well, employers increasingly seeking workers with sort of that knowledge, soft skills, global competencies. So I think that answers part of it. From our pilot program perspective, one thing I'd just like to highlight is that there is a big focus on supporting opportunities for underrepresented students to have access to opportunities. So that's investing in students who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to go, students from low-income families, Indigenous students, and so forth. Some of the research we've seen shows that the benefits are even greater for those groups of students, or the benefits are more pronounced. So just wanted to flag that point too.
Fantastic. And Andy, I'd love to hear your perspective as a university administrator of various programs.
Well, I think there's lots of different reasons from the university perspective. I think the other thing, or the most important one, is that, higher education itself has changed immensely over the past 20 to 50 years, especially. So, it used to be you could go get yourself a bachelor's degree and you'd pretty much be set for life after that in terms of education needs. But nowadays we know that people have to come back to us, and they primarily have to come back to us for a lot of technical needs, but also to develop those soft skills. But when you're dealing with somebody who's a younger person or who's at the very early stages of an educational career, from my perspective, it's just the exposure to the other, to the different. And when I say the other, the different, that can mean lots of different things. That can mean economic systems, that can mean ways of doing business, markets, all kinds of otherness. But being subjected to it, and then learning how to navigate your way through it. Because no matter what field you go into, there's always going to be some canon of knowledge that goes along with it, that everybody cites this and everybody knows that, and that's the trend, and this is safe and that's not safe. But the international arena is often one where those canons are challenged, and where you sort of see, okay, well, yeah, in Canada, this is how we do business. This is what we believe. This is our approach. This is why. But of course, once you go to a different situation where maybe there's a whole complete different political situation that's impacting something you don't understand, and you see their approach and you don't understand, you get frustrated. Well, what's their problem? Why don't they see this? But it's just working through all of those sort of frustrations, putting the dots together, and realizing that there's many ways across the world to do the same thing, and that innovation often occurs whenever you're having people from different systems work together to find a new solution to some sort of common question, problem, etc. So it's just simply, as a university, I want to set them up with enough skills so that when they leave the door, that the world's not going to scare them away. And I know that as an employee, the first thing, or one of the things you're going to have to do, is be confronted in the international arena, whether that means working with international people here in Canada or taking a business trip abroad. And as a university or an educator, what I don't want you to do is have to work through all of that, those questions that I just talked about as an employee. I want you to have done that as a student first, so you have some experience with it. And then I think it'll help you do it and react better and evolve as a professional when you're confronted with it in the work world.
And just on that same vein, Helen, you've seen thousands of resumes over the years. What does it tell you when you see the international experience component to a resume? Does it necessarily give a leg up, or is it tell us you a little bit more in general that this this recent graduate, the student is open to different experiences. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah.
what does it mean?
Yeah, all of those things. And to pick up kind of where Andy left off, all of those skills that you learn when you go abroad for a study term or a work term, they all translate to your future career. Doesn't matter what you do. They all translate. So yes, having seen so many resumes over the course of my career so far, international experience definitely jumps out. And those people more or less are kind of brought to the front of the pile, so to speak. It says a lot about a person who is willing to, take a risk to move somewhere that they're not comfortable with. Maybe they don't even know the language. They're totally out of place. They're going alone. It's the first time maybe they've been away from their family, all of those things. And then when they're there, learning how to deal with challenges and challenging situations and frustrations, as Andy mentioned, it makes a student so well-rounded. And for an organization like McCain and other global organizations, that's critical. When we're hiring, new talent and early talent, there are opportunities to move, to go work in a different part of the world. And if you've already done that, it's easier to do it again. And when we see those resumes and connect with those students who have international experience, we already have a sense that, down the road, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, when they're growing within an organization, if there's an opportunity to move, that they would be willing to do that, likely, and they're comfortable with it. So super critical, and it makes students more well-rounded. To that note, just really quickly, we might touch on this later on. A lot of students don't put their international experience on the resumes, and we find out about it sometimes after the fact. Sometimes we don't at all. But I've been just over the past month in conversations with students, and they say, "Oh, and by the way, I did this," and I'm like, "What? Oh, and by the way, this should have been the first thing you said, or the first thing you put on your resume, and it's not there." So that's another critical piece, is to include those experiences in your resume and even in your cover letter, is super critical.
Excellent. And if anyone on the call is in career services or study abroad offices at universities, that's maybe something to address with your students as you prepare them, not only for the program, but also kind of a debrief after they come back to campus. I just want to, Monique, this must be kind of music to your ears from the IEC perspective to hear employers saying that the international experiences are incredibly valuable, and that must go into your goal setting for the program in itself.
Yeah, in so many European and oceanic countries, as you said, it's not if you're going abroad, but when and where you're going. And our Canadian culture just doesn't see the value of international experience as that natural option for personal and professional growth. But at IEC, we've seen a number of studies that the nature of work and the skills required in the labor market are changing quickly. And as the world becomes more interconnected and the markets become more and more global, young Canadians really need to be able to show that they have those global competencies employers like Helen are looking for, skills like adaptability and problem solving and good communication skills, as well as cultural awareness and sensitivity. And, if not, if they don't have those skills, if they're not picking them up, studies have indicated that Canadian youth might lag behind youth from other countries in terms of global competencies and cultural awareness. So yeah, IEC is working with our colleagues at ESDC and other government departments and our stakeholders at colleges and universities and whatnot to really raise awareness of the benefits of work and study abroad and to increase the resources and tools for youth who go abroad so that, as Helen said, they do put it on their resume and they do recognize the value.
That's great. I just want to flesh out this notion of global skills development. I've heard a lot of kind of anecdotally talking about soft skills that may soft skills development in young people and students may have been set back by the pandemic and everything that's gone on there. And I would love to hear your perspective on that, and what other skills do you see that a student probably going abroad will develop them more rigorously. So I'm going to send it over to Helen, if you can talk about the importance of soft skills and why is that so important?
Mm-hmm. So soft skills, I would say, first and foremost, communication. Verbal and written communication are critical. These are hard and very difficult things to put down on a resume or a cover letter. Obviously, the written skills are there, but unless you have a conversation with an employer, you can't really tell if you're a great speaker or you have those soft skills or not. So really, when you're communicating and networking, the soft skills, like being able to have direct conversations, being able to speak up when you're having a challenge, when you need some help, really being able to explain your background as well and your experiences in a really cohesive way. And this goes back to, including it on your resume or not, but being able to talk about it. Things, very, very simple things like networking. It seems simple, but it's a difficult thing to do. And I think, as Matt mentioned, those skills may be lagging behind. I think networking is a big one. We haven't been out in, seems like forever, but a couple of years to, in-person events, interviewing in person, workshops, open houses with employers, that kind of thing. So really being able to communicate with people is key. And I definitely think the pandemic has made everyone, I think, lag a little bit behind there. And maybe we have some work to do from an employer perspective as well. When our students are with us to help them with those things.
Fantastic. Andy, can you kind of weigh in on this? I know that you're, as I said, you're sort of on the business end of, and you see the students before and after they go on program, and I'd love to hear your take on it.
I agree with Helen. That's something that I've paid attention to a lot the past few years. That the study abroad has evolved a lot, or education abroad has evolved a lot over the years. It's no longer the sort of traditional, maybe third year abroad, elitist type of activity. Even here in Canada, it is something that a lot of students are interested in. They do want to pursue, but they do face a lot of challenges pursuing it. But I would say, as the years have evolved, we've gotten better at the preparation, but we're still lagging on the sort of post follow-up and what to do with study abroad or education abroad after you return. And I agree with Helen that we have to do more in terms of how to tell the students, how do you articulate this experience to others, and how do you use it to propel yourself professionally. That's one of the very first things that I started doing in terms of wraparound return services, is how do you put this on your CV, or how do you put this on your resume, and how do you talk about it in an interview? And I do think, and it's something I don't see these types of sessions being given in our study abroad professional organization group as well. It's slowly starting, but it's certainly not the main thing that we talk about. But it's starting, as well as EDI. So I think we're moving in the right direction for sure. But I still think that it's the challenges. It's getting people out the door because our numbers are so low that's where the focus is still there. But I do think, and I do agree that it will change, as well as the employers articulate it too. So that's another important piece, is that if the employers aren't talking about it, the students aren't going to do it. So when I
Agreed.
hear Helen say these things, it actually helps me to tell the students, okay, I'm going to give you this session on how to put study abroad on your resume. I want to see you show up and pay attention, because quite honestly, I didn't get a lot of attendees for that. They'll show up if I say, do you want to go to Spain next summer? But when I say, okay, let's talk about Spain on your resume now, oh, that's gone. So I think it's a matter of keeping their attention. Like I said too, like in a lot of places, it doesn't appear on the transcript, or it's very, very hidden. And I think that we have to do more to highlight that, so that students can more easily pick it out and people can more easily see it. As well, something that as I was listening to Helen, I'm thinking, okay, well, I would love to work with employers now. And honestly, I don't have a lot of contacts in this group, but I would like to talk to employers to articulate what exactly are these soft skills that we're talking about, and how exactly can we measure them? To be honest with you, I don't know if it's possible to measure soft skills, but that's a conversation we have to take, or we have to have, because people want takeaways and they also need takeaways in order to justify the expense, the time is money, and everything that goes into having this experience for later.
Fantastic. And so just on that, outcomes and goals, John and Monique, could you elaborate on how soft skills or other skill development, is there a plan to measure outcomes, post-evaluation of programs, or sort of rejigging the goals of your two programs accordingly? John, I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, you bet. And in fact, when Andy was talking about measurement, I was like, oh, that's a really good question. Because yeah, for our program, skills acquisition is very much the focus. And when we talk skills, we mean soft skills. So we do plan to assess a number of soft skills: adaptability, problem solving, collaboration, communication, digital skills, creativity, leadership and innovation, maybe one more. But having said that, measuring soft skill development is, and sort of the link to career impacts in the context of education and work abroad is challenging. We will be doing, or our delivery partners will be doing pre and post surveys with participants, so pre-experience, post. But a lot of the measurement techniques are very much self-assessment. It's difficult to make comparisons or have control groups. There are some more kind of elaborate techniques, but they're very resource intensive too, and involve interviews. We're exploring some of those. So it's definitely an area of focus for us, and a kind of a key area in terms of our evaluation planned activities.
So I don't have much to add. As you know, IEC is primarily a cultural program, and our objective is really to make Canadian youth aware of the benefits from international experiences. But we do know that, you know, as young Canadians, when they go abroad, they come back, they talk about the life-changing experiences that they've had and the skills and awareness and competencies that they've developed and gained. And they also tell us they're much more aware of their own sense of Canadian citizenship, and that's a huge benefit to youth in Canada as a whole. So one of the things that we're doing is we are really reaching out to the GSO partners, and we're looking at ways that we can support and develop resources for that wraparound support, as Andy was mentioning, so that when they come back, they can better articulate their international experience story to employers and for their future, right?
Fantastic. And we have time for one last question from the audience. I think Melquin, if you wouldn't mind asking that question, please.
Definitely. There was a question that came in from Lisa. Does virtual international experiences have the same impact on the resume or cover letter? So I'm probably thinking virtual internships, virtual exchanges. Helen, do you probably have some tips on how this could probably translate into a resume or cover letter, or even possibly an interview?
Yeah, I would say it does have the same impact. At the same time, I think employers need to get better at recognizing that it should have the same impact. Students haven't had the ability to travel abroad, right? So the virtual experience does offer the same kind of learning and the soft skills and hard skills as well as being in person would. How to translate that onto your resume or cover letter, I would say similar to how they're doing it when they're actually going in person. Just outlining what they learned, key takeaways, the challenges they had. But yes, it definitely has the same impact.
And Andy, would you, sort of put you on the spot, but would you have anything to add to what Helen was saying as you advise students about resume building and strategies for getting hired and interviews and all that good stuff?
I like a lot of things. To me, it's how you frame it. How it goes a long way. So I think that, if you certainly say, yes, I conducted an online internship as a pandemic response, it wasn't what we were expecting, and we pivoted and we did this, and I did want to go to Uganda face to face, but this was available, then yes, I think that you can make it to look even better than just a normal internship, online, face to face, whatever. But I don't believe myself that employers in Canada, North America in general, have a perception that online is less good than face-to-face. That being said, and since I also work with a lot of incoming international students to Canada, I do know that in cultures around the world that anything online is seen as fun and gaming and those types of have those types of connotations. So I know that sentiment is not worldwide, but I will say it's changing, and I certainly hear the concern behind that question, but I wouldn't worry about online versus face-to-face. What I would focus on is finding something that you're really interested in and that corresponds to your interests and that you think is going to sustain your attention, whether it be face-to-face or online.
Fantastic. And I wanted to point out in the chat, Megan Randall has indicated they use a product called Skill Survey, where both student and their supervisors evaluate them on the top 8 NACE career readiness competencies. So thank you for that, Megan. I really appreciate you suggesting that additional resource. And I wanted to thank the panel and for a really thought-provoking session. I think, as Bono once said, the world needs more Canada, and you guys have delivered it today. So I appreciate it very much. I wanted to also thank all of you who tuned in today. And I wanted to mention that today's session is recording. And will be available as soon as I can download it, and feel free to send it to any colleagues that you feel would benefit from the session. So again, I wanted to thank the panel for all your hard work and all your preparation for today's session, and great job, everyone. Really appreciate it. So on that note, I'm going to turn off the recording and end the session, but I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll take some time this week. We have 5 more sessions as part of the summit, so feel free to tune into those. And as I mentioned, they will be recorded. Some of them are at sort of ungodly hours if you're in certain parts of the world. So the next one is actually at 2 in the morning Eastern time here in Canada and in the US. But if you can't make it, then check out the recording. Anyway, so have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's input, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.